The reason this was created was that we believe that if you bring diverse people together and they listen to each other, they learn from each other, they understand each other better, that's the pathway to a better world. Right? People come in here and they open their minds and they learn about people and cultures and points of view that they'd never been exposed to before. And instead of creating all this conflict, we create a lot of really great mutual understanding that leads to a much better community.
That was Shaun Carver, the Executive Director of the International House at UC Berkeley. We had a great, and I have to say, incredibly timely conversation about how you bring people together from different backgrounds in a living, learning community. We also discussed the difference between student satisfaction and growth, how these are not the same, and how sometimes the job is to put students in uncomfortable situations so they learn and grow. A feel-good episode about people getting along. Enjoy.
Welcome to the Connected College podcast. I'm your host, Elliot Felix. I've helped more than 100 colleges and universities change what they offer, how they operate, and how they're organized to enable student success. And if you're a leader in higher ed and you think that the silos and separations get in the way of student success, then this podcast and my upcoming book, The Connected College, are for you. We're here to learn and work together to bust silos, question tradition, and forge partnerships so that students feel connected to their college, their community, their coursework, and their careers.
I am so excited to dig into the topic of how building diverse communities contributes to student success, and excited to welcome Shaun Carver for this conversation. Welcome, Shaun.
You, Elliot. Pleasure to be here.
I think a great way to get started is to learn how you did. So tell us a little bit about how you got started in higher ed.
Oh, kind of my second career. I was in industry throughout my 20s and had finished my MBA and decided I wanted to do something else with my life. And my university at the time in San Diego had contacted me and asked me if I wanted to teach some business classes, and sounded like a fun gig, and just really loved interacting with these young, idealistic, entrepreneurial business students. From that, I had an opportunity to go to China to teach in a dual degree program with a US and UK Chinese university. So I went to China for a year, and that ended up being 12. And that at that point, I was all in on higher ed. I was teaching, managing, and leading joint programs with Chinese universities and US, UK, Australian universities. Eventually made my way back to the US and spent time in Boston at Holt International Business School and was leading their Boston campus, and then to UC San Diego, back where it all started. And then this opportunity came up. And I've been an expat for a long time. I've been a foreigner in a new country where things were different. I've worked with great communities of international students, and it all came together here in Berkeley.
I'm glad it did. And it sounds like all those different experiences set you up perfectly to lead such an interesting community at UC Berkeley. Tell us a little bit about International House.
So the movement itself started in 1908. If you go back that far, this is 4 years before the Titanic, in New York City. And so a man named Harry Edmonds was just graduated from Lehigh University and was working at Columbia University. And he was walking down the steps of the library, and he passed a student. And as you do, you said, "Good morning." The student gave him a strange look, and that sparked the conversation. And the student said, "I'm from China, and I've been in New York for 3 weeks, and you're the first person to talk to me." So Harry went home to his wife and was very touched by this, the isolation, the loneliness, all of the things that student must have been feeling. And Harry and his wife, Florence, decided to invite international students into their home for a Sunday supper. And so they started engaging and really hosting these international students that were in New York, and a big community grew. And eventually Edmonds pitched to John D. Rockefeller Jr. the idea of an international house, a place where we could all live together and share and learn from each other. He funded New York in 1924, and then in 1930 came to Berkeley, opened up this iHouse, and in 1932 opened up University of Chicago. So there's 3 Rockefeller houses, and Berkeley being one of them.
That's great. I love that story, and I can 100% relate. Studying abroad, I was both welcomed and othered, and it's both an amazing experience, but it can be isolating, and you're exposed to so many things, but you're also far from home, and You learn a lot, you're stretched a lot.
For me, that experience really gave me empathy. These international students, a lot of them are leaving their country, their families for the first time in their lives, and then they're coming to this country. And we think, for us, this is an easy life being, you know, how to do everything, you know, where everything is and how to get information and support. But when I went to China, like I didn't know the language, I didn't know the culture, I didn't know how to get a cell phone or pay my phone bill or
Yeah.
where to get food. I was just
What
everything
happens
was
if you get sick? All these things. Yeah.
that experience abroad really helped me become very empathetic towards the international students coming here and the challenges that they're facing and how can we support them so that they can be successful in what they're here for, which is to study and get these incredible education that the United States universities have to offer.
Yeah. Going to college or going to grad school is a big change for anyone. But when you throw on the international side to that, you amplify those changes and you get maybe higher highs and potentially lower lows.
We don't give them credit enough for how difficult this is. Here
Yeah.
I am at UC Berkeley, right? The number one public university in the world.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Not me, but I didn't go here. I couldn't get in. But you think about going to a top university and how rigorous and how difficult the degree programs are. And then think about doing it in your second language.
Yeah.
What if it was in Spanish or German or French? How difficult would that be for your listeners, right?
Yeah.
And that's what these international students are doing every day. They
Yeah.
are incredibly hard courses in a completely different language than what they're used to. And amazing what they do.
And even if you know the language, the speed. I remember when I studied architecture in Belgium, and immediately everyone said, "Tu viens d'où?" And they were, you come from where? But it was so fast, even though I knew those words individually, that sounded like a new word I'd never heard of. I was like, "What's viens d'où?" I don't know. I don't know what that is. Looking it
Right.
up in the dictionary, no idea.
Yeah.
But the first thing I had to learn was like how to say slowly. But yeah, so it's such a great mission and bringing people together and thinking back to that, the origin story of the steps and the Sunday dinner, creating a community, supporting students. With that in mind, I'd love to hear what's your definition of student success?
Yeah, the whole reason we are here, and we're called International House, but keep in mind we have about 20% domestic students here within this house. And we have a big building right across the street from the law school at UC Berkeley. It was built in 1930. We have about 620 residents, undergrads and graduates, PhDs, postdocs, visiting faculty. And in that 624, I've got 82 different nationalities in this house. The biggest population by country is the United States at 20%. And the next is China at 9, India, France, on the 8, 7%. So very small segments of this population. It's very diverse. Even if you're a domestic student, you're sitting at the dining table, there's probably 6 other countries around you. And you are exposed to a lot of diversity being part of this community. And that's our whole point. The reason this was created was that we believe that if you bring diverse people together and they listen to each other, they learn from each other, they understand each other better, that's the pathway to a better world, right? Where diverse people can understand each other and find friendships and find ways to move forward, not in a unilateral way, but in a multilateral way. How can we create a better world? And we think that starts with better mutual understanding of everybody. And so that's what this is. Rockefeller called it an experiment, the day-to-day living of people, men and women from very diverse backgrounds. And what we see over 95 years is that it's incredible. People come in here and they open their minds and they learn about people and cultures and points of view that they'd never been exposed to before. And instead of creating all this conflict, we create a lot of really great mutual understanding that leads to a much better community. And so that's why we're here. And so when you say, how do you measure student success? How do they leave here with a better understanding of others? You've heard of Sri Lanka. Have you met anyone from Sri Lanka? Have you had a conversation or dinner with someone from Sri Lanka and learned about their culture and their views of the world? Do you know anything about their history, their art? That's what you get here. And so I hope that people leave with a better understanding of other people. Clearly, we believe you're a more tolerant person, more tolerant of other people, of other cultures, of other ideas. So I hope when people leave that they have an understanding that some people disagree with you, and that's okay. They come from a different background, a different culture, and have different values, and that's okay. Because at the end, you see them as people, my friend, my colleague. And so that's what I think success is for us.
Yeah.
And I hope they're less intellectually arrogant. The part of the challenge I see in these communities right now is that people are so sure of the position they're in that they don't even want to listen to anyone else. No point in talking to me. I don't want to listen because I know I'm right. And I think when you get in this environment, when you see that things aren't black and white, right and wrong, that there's a lot of different views of what we think we see or what media sends us as black and white. And you say, wow, there's a lot of gray, and that isn't black and white. I'm a little bit on the darker side of gray, or I'm a little bit on the lighter side of the gray, or I'm right in the middle of this issue, and I just need more information. That's the view I want from people who graduate or leave here from my house.
I love the idea that you come away with relationships that you didn't have, and understanding you didn't have, and empathy you didn't have, and humility you didn't have. We should all aim for those things. And I know my last book, How to Get the Most Out of College, there's a couple of tips in there that are citing the various research, like all the research from Nessie about how the more diverse your peer group is, the more likely you are to succeed in college, and on living learning communities, which I think you don't lead with that, but you fit that definition. The research I've seen on LLCs, the students have stronger relationships with faculty, they take more risks, they have more diverse peer groups. Probably not surprisingly, you're maybe the poster child of that. And I think these are all great definitions and measures of student success. And I want to pull on that thread a little bit and understand how's the International House support that or enable that success? Tell me a little bit about the rooms and the programming and the events.
Being in higher ed for, I guess, 25 years or so now, there's always this debate of how do we view our residents or our students? Are they customers, or how do we view them? I've never really taken to their customers. Certainly, I care about their student satisfaction. I track resident satisfaction weekly. So a quarter of my house gets a survey every week. Extremely satisfied, extremely dissatisfied, 1 to 5. I map that week to week. We get feedback and we incorporate that into how we run. So I have continual improvement, listening and making adjustments. I care that it's a great environment for them. I draw the line where, that we should consider them as our customers, because we want them to be comfortable. My job is to put them in uncomfortable situations. We want them to grow. However you want to measure the growth, emotional growth and intellectual growth, social growth, we want them to grow, which means they got to be in uncomfortable positions. Yes, my rooms are pretty modest. This building was built in 1930. They're small rooms compared to today's newer buildings. They're modestly equipped compared to some of these new apartment style dorms that are being built. We have communal bathrooms. I'll never do an in-suite bathroom. You want to learn about something, go share a bathroom with somebody. Then you really start learning.
That's when the rubber hits the road, yeah.
And you learn how to manage with conflict. You learn to understand not everyone does everything the same way, and finding a way to live together and find compromise. And all of these things come from putting them a little bit uncomfortable. As a policy, all of our undergrads have to double. They have to share a room. And by policy, it has to be someone from a different country. Of course, it would be easier to put American students together, Chinese students together, Indian students together, but we don't. We force a bit of uncomfortableness because that's what our mission is, to help them learn how to be better. So look, if I left this up to the customer approach, they would self-select into their own groups that were comfortable and easy, but that's not my mission. Our whole building was designed to make it hard to stay in your room by yourself all the time. It's fairly small, modest, and that pushes you out into the social areas. It pushes you into the library, into our great hall. And this building was designed with these really incredible social spaces because that's what we're here for, is to encourage people to come together. There's a brand new building that just opened up here at Berkeley called Anchor House, which is this incredible building designed and built for transfer students, non-traditional transfer students. And it is incredible. Washer and dryers in each room, the in-suite bathrooms. And I was commenting to one of the campus leadership the other day, I would never do that. You're making it too easy for them to get into a cocoon, get a comfortable life. And where's the social aspect? Maybe there's a model where you can design a building more around facilitating social interactions than getting into that arms race of how many amenities can you pack into a room.
Yeah, not only does the National Survey of Student Engagement, the Nessie data, support being part of a diverse community, which is not DEI or not woke. It's good practice. It's meeting people and spending time with people who have a different religion, race, background, geography than you. The data also supports what you're saying about residence hall design because tip 41 in the book is living learning communities, but 61 is all about residence hall design. And it turns out hall-based dorms that force you into some of these more uncomfortable situations as opposed to suites or apartments on average is 22% more interaction. There's a higher sense of community. There's actually even slightly higher GPA. The intuition and the information is very well knit together.
I have a vision that someday we open up more iHouses around the world. And
Let's do
the
it.
conversation I was having with the administrator on campus was, look, maybe this is a more cost-effective model for student housing as well. Instead of getting into this arms race, we need to create these in-suites and washers and dryers and rooms, very costly. Maybe there's a cheaper, better way to do it, which is more modest communal living that has a very good community. My satisfaction scores for my residents are miles of where they are on the campus because the community is what we
That's
lead with.
awesome.
And people love it here. I don't want to brag, but 95 years, I got 100,000 alumni total. And my alumni are passionate about that. That 1 year they stayed at iHouse in 1950, they still come back today. They remember that 1 year. They're still friends with those people.
It's interesting.
And that emotional connection means that we're doing something right.
Yeah, they have a greater affinity certainly than they would for a generic residence hall. Bringing together communities of people that have different religions, geography, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, income, for all the reasons we've talked about, is so critical. What's changing and what's challenging about doing that?
What you just talked about is under attack. The idea that diverse groups and all the different diversity that you just named can live together in one community in peace and harmony is just against the narrative that is being thrown out there today, which is you got to kick these people out of your community, otherwise they're going to ruin everything. And you go back to, I talked about 1930, when Rockefeller and Edmonds came to Berkeley, the area that we're in was all fraternities and sororities. This whole neighborhood is surrounded by, still is, right? Fraternities and sororities, administrator, faculty housing back in 1930. It was all segregated. International students had to live 2 miles away from campus. It was redlined. Jewish people were not welcome in this neighborhood. So here comes Rockefeller and Edmonds saying, we're going to build this house right in the middle of this neighborhood. 800 people were in the street arguing about the idea of people of color coming and living in their neighborhood. This was the first coeducational dorm west of New York. So the idea of men and women living together in 1930, that was crazy. We had the vision of this is how we see the world, and we stayed firm. And we're staying firm now. We believe that diverse communities don't have to be squaring off in the center of campus and throwing names at each other and preventing each other on campus. There is a way to come together and to see each other as people that have differences and have conversations about differences and trying to find ways that aren't just me trying to impose my view. Where does that lead if you're only going to say no compromise? That's how we get into these conditions that we're in now. We believe, and I see it. We had protests at Berkeley. We didn't have protests in iHouse. 150 yards were protests on campus last summer. Some of our students participated in that. Of course they do. They have views and they want to voice their opinions. They come in the house and they see their friends. They don't see the others.
The other, yeah.
And so that's when I know the community is working, which is we sit down at the dinner table. Right? We have the best dining on campus. It goes back to our roots. I'm always going to make sure that there's a good dining experience. We have these long communal tables, not small tables where 1 and 2 people, but a 10, 15 seat table where everyone sits around so that you can have these conversations. And the conversations that they were yelling about down the street, they come up to dinner and they have conversations with their friends and their colleagues and their peers at night at iHouse. And that's how we see the world. That's how we would like everybody to be. We don't have to agree. It's totally fine to disagree. But we need to understand each other better, and we need to find ways to move forward without eliminating another side.
Constructive disagreement.
It's certainly under a spotlight right now. And a lot of people are talking about you can't have these people, whoever these people are, in our community. It's just so counter. But we've been doing this since 1930, before DEI. We've been doing the good work for a long time. And we'll stay fast at what we are. We're confident that we're doing the right thing and how we see the world.
That's great. In addition to these like kind of social and political hurdles, are there more administrative and logistical ones as well? I would imagine just the kind of like the sort of business side of being a student, the proliferation of platforms and policies. I think being any student is getting more and more complex. Um, I would imagine that's even more true for the 80% of your residents that are international students. Are there more administrative and technological hurdles in your way as well?
We try to look at everything as a learning experience. So when there is conflict in the house, we're not immune to roommate issues. We're not immune to other kind of conflict that you see on campus between individuals. But instead of throwing a policy at them and saying, this is how we deal with this, we try to sit down and practice what we teach. We try to understand where conflict is coming from. We try to put it in the lens of a lot of these are cultural misunderstandings. These are 20 somethings and 30 somethings that are in their courting behavior. And there's a lot of cultural context in courting behavior that is often misconstrued by other people. But sitting down and having conversations and making them aware that this may be dating culture, courting culture in your country here and in a cross-cultural environment. Some people may take it the wrong way and you need to be considered. From a business standpoint, which is my other hat, I'm MBA, so I always have to think about the business side of it as well. Yeah, the current situation, how you have to ask the question, how attractive are U.S. campuses right now to international students? Campus environments and some of the campuses just seem out of control. If you are a parent and if you're the primary decision maker for your child and where they're going to school and you're watching the news and you're seeing maybe a great university, but is that the community that welcomes my son or daughter? Is that the place I want to send them to live on their own?
Or will I get funding or will I get a visa or yeah.
You hear about the federal cutbacks and how that's going to impact some of these graduate positions. There's just a lot of things that, this ambiguity of what's really going to happen. And so there's a lot of risk out there right now and I think a lot of scenario planning by universities and us included. If funding to the State Department goes down and they can't do interviews fast enough to get people here on time, am I going to have a lot of late cancellations of international students? So we're probably going to push our domestic students up a little bit this year to buffer that. You just track the data and be ready to move when you start getting a sense of how things are going. I would say so far, our app has been open probably 6 weeks now. So we have about 6 weeks of data to look at year to year. And so far, our numbers are as good as they were last year. Knock on wood, hopefully that'll continue throughout the summer and we'll have another great cohort here in the fall.
Nice. You're saying you track the data. Are there like macroeconomic indicators or are there things that you look at that give you a sense of what's to come? Like what are the things in Shaun's crystal ball to help you see the future?
That crystal ball is pretty cloudy right now. I can tell you that. I don't think anyone has a clear view of the next 6 months. I track a lot of things. Look, we have 82 different nationalities in this house. And so one of the things we have to consider is the strength of the dollar compared to the local currencies and how expensive it is and how much that can swing in 1 year. Certainly you'd look at the political rhetoric going back and forth. And is it possible that the current administration picks a couple countries that are on bad terms with us and just cancels student visas from that country?
Yeah, I guess a trade war could escalate into a visa war.
I have a friend who owns an Airbnb and they got a letter from a Canadian tourist who said, given the current administration, I'm canceling my reservation. I don't want to come to the United States. One person, one data point, but I think what you're seeing is anyone from Canada is just not happy with the tone of this administration and are rethinking. Is this a place I want to go on vacation? Is this a place I want to do business with? Is this a place I want to live? And multiply that by the other countries that are feeling the same way. Generally, international students are not looking at this as a 1-year deal. This is a 4-year commitment or a 2-year commitment or a 7-year commitment for a PhD. That's going to lead to an H-1B and immigration maybe. They probably are looking beyond one administration. But I am sure that this influences people's decisions. Do I really want to go to the U.S. this year? I have this offer from the U.K., which at times doesn't look any better. Or I have this offer from Australia, or I have this offer from Canada. All these things influence people's decisions. I used to teach economics, so it's all about incentives. And people have a choice of where they go to school. And if it's not a great environment, they'll do a trade-off and go to a different country, a different school. We got to be careful not to burn our bridges.
So if we don't want to burn our bridges and we want to create communities that are made up of people that have different backgrounds and lived experiences and countries of origin and religion and race and other identities and affinities, I'd love to end with your advice on how folks can do that as they adapt to these changes and into the future.
Yeah, in some ways, iHouse is very fortunate in the fact that residents do self-select here. People apply to here because they want to
Hmm.
be in this community. So they're predisposed to having an open mind. They want that growth mindset. They want to be around different people. So it's challenged and they learn, they grow. And the rest of the campus communities aren't always that way. They may be very closed-minded person, but they excel in their academic area and they're a great candidate and a great addition to the campus. But maybe not the most open-minded person. And we are lucky that we get to choose who comes into this community, and that makes a big difference, I think. So I think what you can do is make sure that institutions are very clear about what their missions and their values are and lead with that. This isn't the place for you if you don't agree to these list of values, and make sure that the decisions that the leadership is making are in line of those values. It's easy to talk about free speech on campus and then the leadership is canceling speakers because a group
Right.
of students doesn't like it. You're already contradicting your own mission, your own values. Working with international students, they know the top 10 brand names of universities. They know Harvard, they know the MIT, they know Berkeley, they know Stanford, they know all these top universities. They don't necessarily know the values, the communities, the cultures, living in the Ohio State University versus living in Manhattan at NYU. They don't necessarily know the differences of the
Right.
campus cultures, the values. And so I think campuses and institutions need to do a better job of getting out there about this is what we believe in. And to be successful here, you got to be in tune with these values. You can't show up and fight our values. These are 100-year-old institutions that are not going to be moved. I think that will help make sure that you're attracting the right students with the right values into your programs versus having people that show up and immediately want the university to change their values. It's difficult for them to do that. I think that helps in making sure that you're getting the right people. And then just creating an environment where it's safe, it's respectful, it's civil, that people with different opinions can see that they're welcome to participate in classroom discussions, that they're welcome in the community, that they can set up a table without people spray painting on their table, that we act civil, we allow people to be different, we allow people to have a voice. That's how you're going to welcome diverse communities, and that's how it's going to be a healthy community with all that diversity.
I think that's such great advice. And I think especially the being clear about who you are and what you value so that you're attracting people who want to be part of that community. And I know you're making, I think, the really important distinction that students are more than customers because it's not all about their satisfaction. It reminds me of where things often go awry is when there's a mismatch between expectations and delivery.
Mm.
It's the reason that Costco has higher in-store satisfaction than Apple because Costco you get precisely what you expected. Apple, you might have two totally different experiences. You
Yeah.
might be there and you're trying to pay for something and someone is saying you can do that on the app and you were expecting white glove treatment and you wanted someone to help you. On the other hand, you might have wanted to pay for it yourself and some pushy person keeps bothering you. So you get an experience that's dissimilar from what you expect. And that's where things go off the rails. And I loved earlier when you're talking about you solve problems with people, not with policies, and have a conversation. And one of my favorite adage about that, Jason Fried from Basecamp has this idea that policy is organizational scar tissue.
Yeah.
That when something happens, most of the time a policy is an overreaction to an isolated incident when you could just have a conversation and these policies just accrete and make it harder for everyone and make your whole organization or institution less flexible.
I love that saying. When I got here, we had a student handbook. Of course, we have a student handbook. It
Yeah.
was 50 pages long, and it included things like don't spray paint on the walls. I'm like, That one person did it, got it embedded in. We got to put that in the handbook for the future so no one ever does it. I'm like, really?
What did you get it down to?
I think it's 15 now.
That's
Stuff we
pretty
have
good.
to have in there. But let's start fresh. Let's not have all the scar tissue of every policy there's a reason it's in there. There's a reason someone added it, but
Happened once, yeah, most of the time.
it
Yeah.
was just full of one-off things. And so I love that saying. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Well,
sometimes you just need to start with a clean whiteboard and put it together fresh.
yeah, so lead with your values and then start fresh and add when you need to and don't when you don't. I love it. Shaun,
Yeah,
thank you so much for these great insights on building such powerful and productive and positive communities.
that was great. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Connected College podcast. Subscribe to my Connected College newsletter at elliottfelix.com for insights and excerpts from my upcoming book, tools you can download, and special offers. You can also find more information about talks I've given, articles I've written, and upcoming events there. And please support the podcast by rating and reviewing it wherever you're listening. Let's create connected colleges where students will succeed.